elections that are a continuation, frankly, of conversations we've had earlier this week in Rules Committee, broadly related to attempts to reform the Electoral Count Act, Judiciary Committee just yesterday on the rise of threats to elections officials, election administrators. And it stems from a briefing held earlier this week by Assistant Attorney General Polite, took place on Monday, when he indicated that the Department of Justice Elections Threats Task Force has reviewed over 1,000 contacts reported as hostile or harassing by the election community. Of these 1,000 contacts, about 11% were found to warrant a federal criminal investigation, and about 4 cases have been charged so far. So from 1,000 to 11% of those, do the math, 4 cases have been charged. But first question is, besides the 1,000 contacts that the task force has reportedly reviewed, are there additional contacts that are waiting to be reviewed? How familiar are you with this activity?
I'm not sure I'm intimately familiar with the flow of the numbers. I know that there's been a significant over the last 12 months, uptick in engagement with state and local election officials. I think there's been tabletop exercises, lots of outreach. Both the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, and I have done calls with 1,000+ election workers and officials. And so I'm not sure. I think it probably will get lost in the numbers a little bit.
That's fine. I guess the more important question is a matter of policy. So forget the numbers for a second. To your knowledge, does the task force review every contact that's been reported as hostile?
To my knowledge, but I'd have to circle back to you in case there's some clarification that's required.
I'd love the clarification on the policy of what to further investigate post-report versus what not. And in the same spirit, safety of elections administrators. Obviously, we're living in an era where elections workers, whether it's at the state level, the local level, or even volunteers, feel that they're under increased threat from election deniers and others who may wish them harm. I believe it's critical that the federal government demonstrate that it stands ready to respond to the election community's concerns. And doing that requires an adequate allocation of resources to the problem. So the first follow-up question to what I asked Assistant Attorney General Polite yesterday is, in each of the FBI field offices, is there a special agent assigned specifically to the task of responding to concerns raised about election threats, coordinating a response, or is it yet an additional responsibility on top of other work?
Well, let me answer your question this way. We have at the FBI, in every field office, somebody who's specifically designated as an election crimes coordinator. And that is their responsibility, and that's a program that we've had in place for a while. I will say that with the uptick and the trend that you're talking about, the burden or the workload of those people has significantly grown, right? I think before those coordinators would see a huge uptick in work around the time of an election, right? But now with election-related violence or political violence becoming an almost 365 days a year phenomenon, those folks are, I think, even more taxed. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in response to your other question, with the significant uptick in engagement between the FBI, all the field offices, and their state and local election counterparts, the job has grown significantly.
Yeah, and let me just emphasize the point that you just made, because I think it bears highlighting. It's no longer just around election time when this starts up. When I served as California Secretary of State, we start making rounds to fusion centers, getting everybody sort of focused on this post the 2016 election, right? Because the world changed in that cycle. It wasn't just election day; it's the lead up to election day. What are the registration deadlines, the vote by mail deadlines, et cetera. But to underscore how year-round this is now, I mean, it's been almost 2 years since the November 2020 election. And yes or no, are there people still challenging the results of the November 2020 election, and not just social media posts and tweets, but activity, including threatening activity that stems from that. Yes or no?
Well, certainly, all of the various election-related threats that we contend with have become more of a ubiquitous, all-year-long phenomenon. Not just the ones that you mentioned, but also, we haven't talked about the malign foreign influence piece. The foreign governments and their efforts, a lot of people don't realize this because they tend to, focus just on the election time. But those efforts, the malign foreign influence piece, cyber targeting, and other efforts, those are happening same way pretty much all year long.
All right. So one more statement and one final question. The statement is this, because I appreciate how quickly the FBI, other departments and agencies have had to come up to speed on misinformation in the space, disinformation in the space, the dangers, physical and otherwise, that it creates, undermining confidence in our democracy, the electoral process, specifically, and the general policy of the FBI and others not taking public actions or making statements close to an election or as it pertains to candidates for office. When you now have more and more of election deniers and conspiracy theorists running for office, and specifically for offices related to election administration at the state and local level, I truly hope that we are thinking ahead on that and strategizing how to maintain the policies of neutrality, not being political, but at the same time doing what's necessary to defend our democracy. Final question. What else do you need from Congress, or this committee specifically, but Congress more broadly, in order to receive adequate resourcing and attention to these issues?
Our budget request, I think, calls for significant upgrades to our IT systems. We talked earlier in response to one of the earlier questions about the importance of AI and things like that. We've also asked for, on the cyber side, because that's kind of cutting across everything, some significant increases there. And so those are some of the things I would call out. There's a number of them in the budget request, but that are particularly important as we try to get ahead of the threats. I think that's one of the things that we all need to be getting better at, is trying to focus on where's the threat going to be a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and not just tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Padilla. Senator Kennedy.